Good vibrations.
It is episode 174, and my guest today is David Kurten. Welcome on, David.
Hi, good to be here.
So you're a school teacher turned politician, now leader of the newly established Heritage Party, and you're a member of the London Assembly. Does that sound about right?
That's right. All of those things are true, yes.
Okay, great. And do we find you in London today?
Yeah, I'm in London today. I'm at home as usual in the circumstances because City Hall, where I work in the London Assembly, is closed, and it has been since March, except for a month where it opened about September, October. And literally I've had one or two meetings in City Hall in the building there in the last year, which is ridiculous. So, wow. I'm just doing most of my work from home.
As we all are. Who would ever have believed we'd be living like this? And how's the latest lockdown treating you so far?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, it's not affecting me so badly. I'm very lucky. I've got a bit of a garden where I am, so I can go outside, and it's fairly peaceful where I am. But I know for many people, I mean, if you're stuck in a flat or something, it's horrible. And if you've got you're in a confined space with lots of other people, it's all day. It's absolutely awful. So I understand how terrible it is for a lot of people. I mean, especially younger people. I mean, I'm nearly 50 now, so I'm getting on a bit. So I don't need to go out to clubs and music venues and this so much. But I know for people who do, and I did a lot when I was younger, it's awful because the government is destroying our culture. It's destroying our society. And, I feel for the people who are much, much more affected by this than I am. And, I want it to end.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I'm past all that stuff myself now, but I enjoyed doing it in my youth. And I really feel for young people at this time who can't express themselves the way you need to as a natural part of progressing through life. If you're in your 20s, it's natural for you to want to go and socialise and have fun and pursue leisure activities, and all of that is being taken from young people. And then there's younger children who are having to supposedly learn from home right now because they can't go to school and they're missing their friends. They can't go out anywhere. Every day is the same. Monday is like Thursday, is like Saturday, is like Sunday, and on it goes. It's just so harmful and so detrimental in so many ways, in my view. What do you think would have been an effective alternative to these lockdowns in terms of the way the government could have handled it in a more constructive and compassionate way?
Yeah, well, it's very clear. We should have done what Sweden did, should have followed the Swedish model, which was then later espoused in the Great Barrington Declaration. You keep on allowing people to do what they want to do, and life continues as normal, but then people who really do need to be protected, you can shield them, as would happen in a normal flu season and a normal winter. And, we got into this on the back of Professor Ferguson's dodgy modelling from Imperial College, where he predicted that 500,000 people would die if we didn't have a draconian lockdown. And the MPs all voted for that. But on the very same day that they voted, I think it was March the 25th last year, then a new paper came out that says, oh, well, this isn't true anymore. Not as many people as this are going to die. But by that time, the MPs had already made their decision. But, this was a decision based on modelling. And modelling is not real science, because you can have an algorithm. You can put any numbers into the algorithm and you can get any result that you want. But now we've got 10 months of real data, and it shows that countries that didn't have a lockdown, like Sweden, like Brazil, like Belarus, have fared no worse than we have, and in some cases better. So that's what we should have done. And, it's absolute madness, but it's worse than madness. I think it's wickedness to carry on with this lockdown when we know that it doesn't work. It doesn't have an effect. I mean, I mentioned young people, you mentioned schools, and, the children's education is vastly affected, but it's also businesses, the small businesses, particularly hundreds of thousands have gone to the wall and gone bankrupt because of this. The economy's devastated. Our national debt is going through the roof, and also people's mental health is suffering tremendously. So we know this. We just got to end this right now, but we need some common sense people to do it. There don't seem to be many.
Exactly. And what I find incredible is that MPs just keep voting time after time for further lockdowns. So there's been 2 or 3 occasions over the last few months where MPs have been able to block these motions to continue lockdowns or to apply further ones. And I can only imagine how many people would have been writing to their MPs and campaigning for them to represent the will of the people and vote against all this draconianism. And what happens is each and every time they just go and vote for it further. And you usually find about 500 odd vote for it, and there's usually a stray 13 or 16 that vote against it. 16 people with a conscience in Parliament. Imagine that. And to me, it just smacks of an ulterior motive for the whole thing. You know, this is about so much more than keeping us safe from a virus. There are other agendas at play here, in my view. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, good for the 13 or 16 or 20 who vote against it, but that's just a tiny number. I mean, you've got basically the MPs, they just do what they're told. They're lobby fodder, most of it. You know, the fake conservatives, as I call them, follow Matt Hancock through the lobbies to lock us down again. And Labour want even more draconian lockdowns, as do the SNP. You know, so there's no party in Parliament that's standing up for liberty. As a party, you've got individual MPs like Desmond Swayne who are, you know, really, really good. But, you know, you've got no chance when you've got 500 or so MPs that are voting basically to take away our civil liberties and imprison us. But, you know, this goes beyond, you know, just a lockdown, because if there were any common sense, if they could look at the figures, if there was, you know, open and honest debate about this, you would look at data from both sides of the argument, which is what science does, and then, you know, look at what's happened in Sweden, as we mentioned before, and see, well, you know, there's no upside to a lockdown. It doesn't make any difference. You know, let's carry on life as normal without destroying things, and you know, and look after people who need to. But there is the Agenda 2021, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, Build Back Better, the Green New Deal, whatever you call it, it's all the same thing. It's sort of an agenda of corporatist communism, basically, which is going on. I mean, Boris Johnson, you know, he wears a Agenda 2030 lapel badge at some of his press conferences these days. He says we're going to build back better, which is a slogan that comes from the United Nations for Agenda 2030. And what's happening is that small businesses are being destroyed, and that then is wonderful for big global corporations who want to control everything. They want to increase their market share, obviously make profits, but they want to atomize, individualize people, keep us all in our homes so that we don't have any resistance as well. I mean, that's not the businesses so much as the government and the people behind the governments and the big sort of global players that you see in the World Economic Forum and so on. And it's no secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab are openly talking about the Great Reset. And it's on the cover of Time magazine, the Great Reset, how wonderful they think it's going to be. They're trying to sell us this, but it's not going to be fantastic. It's going to be awful, because no one voted for this, that we haven't democratically decided that we want our country and our culture and our economy destroyed. But this is being done to us under cover of COVID. And it's very, very wicked what's going on.
Absolutely. I go along with all of that. It is wicked. It's pure evil, what is being done to people. And it's criminal as well. So there have been various people that have tried to launch criminal prosecutions against British MPs, and specifically Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock. And in my view, that's exactly the way they've been behaving. They've committed fraud, treason, genocide, and crimes against humanity. This is evil, criminal behaviour on the part of people that we're supposed to look up to, who are supposed to represent us. They're supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to represent the will of the people, and they're not doing that. What we're living in now is a fascist tyranny, in my view.
Yeah, it is fascist, and fascism is the word because fascism and communism are both ideologies of the left. Fascism then became National Socialism. The clue's in the word there in Germany in the last century. But in communism, the state owns everything. But in fascism, you still have massive corporations. They're not owned by the state, but the state controls them. And the state says, you can run a business, but you can't run a business. And that's exactly what's happening. The small businesses are being destroyed through the actions here. And the longer we go on, the more will be destroyed for absolutely no reason whatsoever, leaving massive government subsidies for the people that they want to let carry on their business, and the big global corporations, of course, as I said. I mean, there's nothing wrong with big business per se, but when they're not acting fairly, or where they get an unfair advantage over small businesses and challengers and competitors, and that's absolutely wrong. But this is what's happening at the moment. So the government is deliberately hollowing out, a lot of the country, the backbone of the country, the small and medium-sized businesses, the entrepreneurs, for the big global corporations. That's fascism. And people who could be independent and work for themselves and stand on their own 2 feet find that they can't do that anymore because they don't have any customers and they can't carry on their trade, and therefore they either have to become reliant on the state through the furlough scheme, which of course is going to end at some point, and then the jobs won't be there. So people who are on the furlough scheme will then be reliant on universal income. There's talk of bringing in universal basic income, which is a very far left idea, and people will then become permanently reliant on the state, and then you're controlled, because if you step out of line, I mean, not just in what's traditionally, what's really criminal, if you're a real criminal like a murderer or the thief or something, of course, then you are put in prison or so on. But now what they want to do is anyone who has the wrong opinion is silenced, thrown out of their job, and that you're a naughty boy, you're going to be accused of hate speech or these new kind of things that they want to make into criminal, they classify and define as criminal when they're actually not. So it's going to be a very dystopian world that's going to come in if we allow it to take place. And it is, as you say, fascist in a way, and it's terrible, absolutely terrible thing that's being done to this country, and not just here, but many other countries around the world too. You can see its global nature through that fact.
Well, that's right. I mean, I get messages daily from people in Denmark, Austria, Germany, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and they all say it's getting really bad here. More lockdowns, more rights and freedoms taken away, more totalitarianism. And they think it's just in their country, and they don't realise it's happening everywhere. This is truly a worldwide agenda. There are some very sinister, far-reaching forces at play here, and it can seem overwhelming and like something we just can't get out of. But there's got to be a way out of this nightmare, because none of us want to live like this. I mean, what do you think the way out of this is going to be? What's it going to take to put this evil down?
It's a very difficult thing. I mean, I wish there was a really simple answer, because if there was, we'd have done it by now. And I think that we need 3 things in a way. We need in the short term, we need activism, and back in August, September, there was some fantastic days where there were rallies in Trafalgar Square with 20, 30,000 people, many people coming out in a show of strength saying, we don't want this, and it was smeared as being conspiracy theorists and so on. This is what the media and the government do, but it wasn't by any means. It was a massive, diverse cross-section of people. There were white, black, women, men, old people, young people, students, hippies, business people, a lot of business people actually there, because they're the ones that are really, really suffering, small businesses. So it was just a cross-section of society and normal people come out to say, we don't want this. But there's been a massive crackdown on that, with the police becoming more and more and more draconian. And what I think at the moment, I'm sad to say that at the moment, I don't think it's a smart thing to go out on the street and, do some protests with a small number of people, because 50 people turn up to Parliament Square and 200 police turn up and they put it down immediately, and the poor people that go get fined and then they get arrested and so on. I think we need more protests, but they've got to be big and they've got to be well organized, and to make sure that people are not in danger from the police. And that's a terrible thing to say, because now we are citizens, we are in danger from the police enforcing these repugnant rules with violence and brutality. We're in the same, I wouldn't say we are, as bad as what Nazi Germany was like or what it was like in the Bolshevik Revolution. But we're getting there. And certainly compared to how you would expect the police to treat you as a normal citizen going about normal everyday activities, if you compare that to last year, I mean, there is no comparison. We're more like East Germany now than we were like the United Kingdom in 2019. It's appalling. We need to do activism for the short term, but we've got to do it smartly. In the medium term, we need to bring legal cases, and we need to be smart about what legal cases we're bringing. We need to bring legal cases against shops that enforce mask wearing, schools that enforce mask wearing, branches of the health service that discriminate against people because they're not wearing a mask and things like this, and also against individual police officers who are abusing their position as police constables and hitting people over the head with their truncheons and so on for no reason. We need to bring these cases, and so that sets a precedent. But the government's been very, very clever in putting kind of a shield for themselves against legal action, because there's been a lot of judicial reviews, and I obviously support the people who are bringing judicial reviews against various regulations that come in. But the problem is that the government introduces new regulations in March, for example. You bring the judicial review, it gets to the court in July. By the time it gets to court, the regulation period has ended because it was only for 2 or 3 months. And then the judge says, well, there's no longer a point in this case because this is for regulations that don't apply anymore. And then they change them into something else. So they've been very, very, wickedly wise, if you like, wickedly shrewd about doing this, because they protected themselves by continually changing the regulations. So it's very hard to get a judicial review against them in time. It's very, clever, but very wicked as well. But in the long term, that's what I'm doing in the long term. I'm setting up a new political party, the Heritage Party, which will, completely support free speech and liberty. And, I've been very vocal about this, that these regulations to take away our civil liberties and destroy businesses and society are repugnant, and we would end them straight away if we got into power. But this is a long-term project, but we need to have that for the long term as well as the medium term and the short term. And it's a very long answer I've given you, but I think we need a multifaceted approach. It's not going to be easy, but we need to be smart on so many levels to overturn this.
Sure. I think you might find your Heritage Party becomes very popular in current circumstances as time goes on. In terms of these protest events, I think one of the main reasons why these have tailed off a bit recently is because the weather is not great. It's cold and it's wet and it's blustery. It's not nice to be out. But if all this madness is still with us when the spring comes around, March or April, I think they'll probably start to pick up in number again, even though we've had disgraceful behaviour from the police. I know you were at a couple of the events in Trafalgar Square in September, October time. I think you spoke at a couple, and you would have witnessed the absolutely disgraceful behaviour of supposedly the police. Some people think they were sort of hired mercenaries who weren't even genuine police officers. But I saw you taking Sadiq Khan to task on the behaviour of the police at one of these events during a question time you had with him as part of your London Assembly role. So you really made him squirm there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and he didn't have a good answer, and he just was trying to brush the question off and saying, "Oh, it's not my job to answer. You know, it's the police. Ask Cressida Dick. You know, make a complaint to the Independent Police Complaints Authority, and so on." But you know, he's the Mayor of London, and which means he's the Police and Crime Commissioner. He's paid over £150,000 a year to do his job, so he needs to give an answer and to give an account for this. And he tried, as he always does, to try and make me look silly by saying, well, you're talking about regulations from two different things. But when the regulations were the same, you've seen the police treat causes that Sadiq Khan likes, like Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion. They get treated with kid gloves. You know, even the police kneel down before Black Lives Matter protesters. And that was on a day, I think it was June the 6th, when they weren't supposed to be protesting under the regulations themselves. But then, you know, the week before and the week after, they go in with brutality against freedom protesters. And even in the big rallies in Trafalgar Square, I spoke on one on the 19th of September, which was fantastic. You know, the police came in, you know, in units of 50 or more again and again to try and close it down. And they couldn't, because there was such a big crowd around it. They couldn't get through the crowd because it was so, you know, there were so many people. But if they could have, they would have, and they would have, you know, cut off the speakers, cut off the electricity, and taken all the equipment and arrested the organisers and so on. That's you know, it seems to be what they were trying to do. And the week after, I didn't speak at the one on the 26th of September, but they arrested one of the speakers, a respected German doctor, Heiko Schöning, after the rally, because he went up to Speaker's Corner to finish his speech. He got cut off, and he was arrested for speaking in Speaker's Corner. You know, not by one or two police officers, but again, like a swarm of 50 or so police officers. They go in against one person these days, and this seems to be their tactic to try and show, you know, overwhelming force, you know, as a bit of a psychological operation to make people scared of them, you know. But this is not how the police should be acting to peaceful citizens speaking in Speaker's Corner. I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent. And, you know, I asked Sadiq Khan about this, and he actually said to me, yeah, I think people should still be allowed to speak in Speaker's Corner. But yet the very next weekend, they were out arresting people again. So either he doesn't know what's going on, or he doesn't have any power, or he's actually saying one thing and, you know, approving another. I mean, I don't know which is the case, because I don't know, you know, what goes on in all of his private conversations with the sort of Cressida Dick and other police officers. But we can certainly see that they are acting very, very badly and repugnantly, I would say, tyrannically, in a way which they shouldn't be acting in England or in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, something's got to explain why so many of these MPs and people like Sadiq Khan and Priti Patel and all these others are acting against the interests of the people of their country, and they're going against what their roles are supposed to represent as public servants. So it's either down to they're all on the same page because they don't want to step out of line, and they're just going along to get along, and it's just easier to vote for these lockdowns and stay on board with the agenda, or there's ulterior motives at play, and they're either being paid or bribed or blackmailed in some way to go along with things. It's got to be one or the other. There's not much conscience in there. There's not much compassion and empathy towards people, which I guess is a quality that's generally lacking in politicians and public servants, sadly. But for me, it's got to be either going along to get along or representing other agendas as to how these people can behave so treacherously towards the people of their country.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of different things. I mean, I think that some of them are treacherous because they're fully paid up globalists. They're fully signed up to Agenda 2030. They're members of the Trilateral Commission or other organisations that want to push a globalist agenda and would have no problem whatsoever in taking away our freedoms, and brutalizing the people of a country because they just consider us as, useless eaters or whatever, just basically no better than animals, and that's what some of them, I think of us. I don't think that's a very big number of people, but I think there certainly are people in government or behind government who think like that. I think there's also some people who are treacherous and who are making a lot of money out of this. They're linked to people who are involved in the companies that are making big profits or getting subsidies from the vaccines or from PPE or also, from online deliveries, these big global corporations that are doing well, like Amazon and so on. I'm sure there are people who are, got some connections to some of these companies. There are people, I think, who are genuinely think that they're doing the right thing, but are sincerely wrong. Because they genuinely think that there is a virus which is as bad as the Black Death going round, but clearly there isn't. And for those, I hope we can continue to make the argument that this isn't. This virus it's maybe a little bit more severe than a normal coronavirus. Severe as maybe a flu, being a bad flu season, but it's not the Black Death. So, I don't know how we can get into these people's heads to, look at the data and look at, be reasonable and be rational and look at the actions that they're taking and supporting are like massively disproportionate, but there are some people like that. A very interesting case was the MP Charles Walker, and a few weeks ago the police were arresting a 72-year-old woman outside the Houses of Parliament and bundling her into the back of a van just for protesting. And this MP is almost as though he had an epiphany and he saw this and he was absolutely shocked at what the police were doing to ordinary citizens who were protesting. And he was saying that, what are you doing? What are you doing to this woman? This is wrong. This is not British. And then he asked about it in the Commons afterwards. And it was almost like watching him. He had no idea that this was happening, that this was how the police were treating the people, because they're stuck in a bubble in Westminster. They go to Westminster, they arrive in a chauffeured car, and then at the end of the day, they go back to, a mansion in the suburbs, and at the weekends, they go to a country house in their constituency, and they have no idea about what's going on in central London or in central Manchester where people are protesting. They don't feel the effects of having their business closed down. They don't feel the effects of not being able to meet up with their friends and family and being isolated. But it's like for the first time he realised, wow, this is tyranny going on in Britain, and he was shocked and appalled by this. I mean, I think that if some of the MPs went to some of these protests like I have, I've been to almost all of them to watch what's going on, and I've been absolutely appalled at the police. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't have seen it with my own eyes. How they're treating people, and especially picking on the weaker people. They seem to pick on older people, and they pick on women. And this just gets everyone mad. You have 10 men wrestling a woman to the ground. I mean, this is disgusting, absolutely disgusting behavior from the police. And I've always supported the police all through my life, and I loathe the actions that they've been taking against, women and older people and innocent people for basically just using their fundamental freedoms to protest and to speak and to assemble, and this is being taken away by these, dictators, people who have become dictators like Priti Patel and so on, and some of the things and statements she's making, which are, so derogatory to all ordinary people. It's absolutely loathsome, in my view. All I can do is speak about it. I wish I could do more. I wish I could make it stop. But I won't stop speaking about it.
Yeah, and I suspect that, well, the rest of us are being restricted, prevented from going out anywhere. We can't go to the pub, we can't go to a cafe, we can't go to a restaurant. I bet many of these MPs are still going to private members' clubs and gentlemen's clubs, which are remaining open behind the scenes. That's just my suspicion about it. And what's unfeasibly frustrating to me is the fact that in the public domain now is all the information anyone could ever want to show how this so-called pandemic has been hyped up out of all proportion, and there's no justification for these extreme measures that are being taken. We know that the tests are not reliable. They give false positives. We know that COVID has been getting put on death certificates when people die of anything. We've heard of doctors being paid to list COVID as a cause of death. We know that many of these COVID wards in hospitals are actually empty when we're told they're war zones and they're out of control. We've had whistleblowers, doctors and nurses coming forward and saying, actually, we're all sitting around twiddling our thumbs and doing TikTok dances because there's nobody in the hospitals. So all this information is out there and it's available to anyone to access. But it's thanks to the mind control and the fear-based propaganda of the mainstream media, and particularly the BBC, who I think have been completely loathsome and treacherous in this whole thing. People sadly still get their information from these mainstream media sources, who are all controlled ultimately by the same parties at the top of the tree. And it's because of that people have got this perception that there really is a dangerous pandemic out there. But all the facts and all the information which is readily available paints a different story. If only people would turn off the TV, realise that it's there to control them, keep them in fear, and actually do their own research. It's so frustrating that this could all be put to bed so quickly if people would only do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you said a lot of things there which I've been looking into, and it's all absolutely true. And I don't like to watch the mainstream media, but I do every now and again, because it's my job. If I didn't have to, I would completely turn off, and I would get my news from other sources, which are far more reliable, because the mainstream media, they're not news outlets anymore. They're narrative outlets, and they're there to create and perpetuate narratives to allow the government to do certain things, or the people behind the government to put in place certain programs that they want to do, and to convince everybody that they're right, and to program everybody and to take control of everyone's minds. And what's is quite worrying. It's this shadowy organisation, this SAGE, which seems to be running the government and dictating government policy. And the Prime Minister seems to not have any opinion of his own. He's like, SAGE says this, the scientists say this, so I'm going to do this, and this is what we're going to do now. And you've got the psychological, behavioural psychology experts on SAGE and on this psychology unit in Whitehall, and they seem to be, creating new ways of changing and twisting the narrative to keep us in this lockdown and to take us into a place that we don't want to go. But you've got to get out of this, and I have, you have, millions of people have, and we realize now that almost everything on the mainstream media is a lie, and you are not going to get reality from the mainstream media. You're going to find that in another place. And as you say, all the data is there. We've got, even the person who invented the PCR test said that it's not reliable for determining the presence of a virus. We know about the thermal cycles, and they use way more than they should do, even if you were going to try and use it. And with a high number of thermal cycles, it can pick up, coronavirus anywhere in anything. You've got Tanzania. They tried this and they found coronavirus in a papaya. And that was it came back positive for that. It's
and
just
a goat.
And a goat, yeah, but they keep on using this, and they change things. So it was, first of all, we need 2 weeks to flatten the curve. No one talks about flattening the curve anymore, do they? That's gone. That 2 weeks turned into 3 months, and then it was the second lockdown, and then it's the mutant strain. Well, look, this is a programming language, isn't it? Because there are always mutations. Viruses mutate like many, many times a year. It's not unnormal. It's not unnatural. It's normal. It would be unnormal if they didn't mutate. But then you get the headline, mutant COVID strain, and that then frightens everybody who doesn't know much about science. And this goes with the whole dumbing down of education over the last 50 years, and it's far fewer people have got a good grasp of mathematics and statistics and science than they had before. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I do, because I obviously got a couple of degrees in chemistry. I was a chemistry and science teacher for 20 years. So, I can look at these things and I can see immediately how they're trying to manipulate data and manipulate graphs, and to create a narrative rather than to present the facts in an open and transparent and scientific manner, and to conflate different figures which shouldn't be conflated to create a narrative. I can see that straight away. And someone tried to do that to me just earlier this week in the London Assembly when I asked about some of the data. So, yeah, I can see that. You can see that. People are waking up to this, though. But, the mainstream media is appalling. And, the government is just following, they seem to be blindly following Sage, and they need to stop doing this. But it's, I think everyone listening hopefully is going to be plugged into, sources of reality rather than sources of fake news, which is, the mainstream media is the fake news, even though they pretend that they're not. And that's how it is.
Yeah, I think my audience will be aware of that. A name that keeps coming up in my research into what's happening all over the world as well is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who seem to have their hand in just about everything. They've got corporations in their pocket, governments in their pocket, and it's just the same in Britain as it is in America and so many other places. The CCP seem to have been very busy, stealthily under the radar these last few years, consolidating an empire for themselves. Have you come across infiltration by the CCP in your research?
Well, I mean, some of it's very open. I mean, their Belt and Road Initiative, where they want to get countries into debt and in order to be able to trade with them. I mean, they're very open about that, and they've given loans to many, many countries around the world, especially in Africa in the last decade or so. And then they've found the bait and switch, and then they're like, oh my goodness, we've signed over our mineral rights to China, and they did a deal with Italy, I think, with the new government, and suddenly a lot of the old leather manufacturers in the north of Italy found, oh well, now suddenly Chinese companies are coming in to take over and set up the same thing cheaper and with slave labor, and then they're putting all of the sort of older small businesses out of business and so on. So this has been going on, with their Belt and Road Initiative. There's so much there, and I haven't investigated it all, but certainly you've seen the what appeared to be videos of people dropping dead in the street and so on in China, back last year in February. That appears to be propaganda now to get the West panicked. And we did, and we locked everything down. And as China then opened up, and so now they're having big street parties in Wuhan, which was the supposed center of the epidemic, while we're locking ourselves down. And to be honest, you got to hand it to them. They're very, very clever. They're very wicked. They want to take over the world in some way. That's the the 100-year plan written by Deng Xiaoping. He's not alive anymore, but they're looking to be the main power in the world within 100 years. That's their aim and their goal. And our leaders are either stupid or corrupt. So they've either gone along with it because they don't realize that this is, what their aim is. Don't worry about this. We'll just outsource our jobs to China and let them do this and that, and in our country and take over our manufacturing and so on. It's going to be okay. They're either stupid or they're corrupt because they make a bit of money or, quite a lot of money out of it for themselves. So, they've been very clever. You've got to hand it to them. But, we need leaders that are even cleverer and smarter than people in the Chinese Communist Party, because it seems they do have a plan to increase their influence and their power. There's no question about that. The only person who seems to have understood this is Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you if you've been keeping a close eye on the situation in the US with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and if you've got any insights into what might really be going on there beneath the mainstream media headlines and the official narrative, because we're told that Biden's due to be inaugurated any day now. Many people think that's not going to happen, but have you been keeping a close eye on what's going on in the States right now?
Yeah, I've been keeping a very close eye on things, and there's always the smears. I mean, the Democrats and the mainstream media in America have been smearing and trying to take down Donald Trump for the whole time he's been president. But it's the whole issue about the storming of the Capitol on the 6th of January. Now that seems to be, there seems to be now coming out a lot of evidence that this was pre-planned and it was Antifa who were doing it. And there's a CNN reporter embedded with one of the Antifa leaders who stormed the Capitol Hill. So the mainstream media knew about this. They knew that it was going on. They were there to film it. And of course, the films came out and they tried to impeach Donald Trump. But now, without any evidence, without any kind of fair trial where you look and you gather the evidence and then you make a fair case, he's got no time to defend himself in this. And it looks like actually now it's coming out he didn't have anything to do with it. He certainly didn't incite a riot. He called for peace. But as for the inauguration, I mean, I'm hearing so many different things about what might happen. The latest I've heard is that there's not going to be any people there, any citizens there. It's just going to be 20,000 soldiers and around where the inauguration's happening in Washington. I don't know what's going to happen on that day, but I've heard so many different things. That on the 14th of December something's going to happen there to stop the before the all the states had to declare their and certify the results, but nothing really happened. I heard that on the 6th, that there was going to be Mike Pence was going to overturn the election fraud on that date and certify the second set of electoral voters from Pennsylvania and so on, but that didn't happen. You're looking into how the thing works. That would never have happened anyway, because it's the House of Representatives and the Congress have to vote on it. So, it isn't up to one person to do that. That would never have happened, but I heard rumors it was going to happen. I'm hearing rumors about what's going to happen on the 20th. I really don't know, but there's so many bits of information and misinformation and half information flying around. It's hard to actually have know what's going on, to be honest.
Absolutely. I get messages every 5 minutes about, the BBC's about to be taken down, they're going to take CNN down, the emergency broadcast system's going to kick in, POTUS is going to make an address to the nation at 8 p.m. tonight, and none of this stuff has happened, but still the claims come that this is on its way and this is going to happen. And you reach a point where you realise that all you can do is just detachedly observe and wait, because this is out of our hands now in terms of what's happening over there. There's nothing any of us can do about this other than wait to see what unfolds. But it just brings it home to me how wildly different somebody's worldview is if all they do is watch the BBC or Fox News or any of these mainstream media outlets or read so-called newspapers, as opposed to someone like you or I, who take the personal responsibility to do our own research, and we go to a wide variety of sources, we have a completely different view of what's really going on in the world to the average person. So the average member of the public is probably of the view that Donald Trump is finished, he's all washed up, he's got a few more days in office and that's it. He's a racist, he's a homophobe, he's a misogynist, he's a sore loser, he's done great harm to America, and Joe Biden is the best hope to turn it all around. That's the narrative that's been spun by the mainstream, and there'll be many people that have actually swallowed that and have not looked into any alternative takes on it. And then these same people would think there's this deadly virus around and it could strike at any moment and it's out of control, and the only way to control it is to keep everything under lockdown, and we just don't know what's going to happen. And it's just amazing the gulf between the way these people see what's happening in the world and the way people who actually do research see it. And yeah, I have to kind of step into the mind of one of these people every now and again just to keep things into perspective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why I sometimes watch the mainstream media to see what they're plugging and think, well, if you actually watch this, this is what you think. You actually think Trump is bad, Biden is good, Black Lives Matter are wonderful. They don't show any of the kind of rioting that Black Lives Matter have done over the last 6 months, destroying neighborhoods in Washington and many other cities in the USA. And that's right. Kind of like completely erased from the television screens and newspapers. But then when you have the storming of the Capitol, most of it, some of it was, or most of it was done by Antifa as far as it's coming out now. That's they're right. Completely, they're overblowing that, they're whipping it up and using that to denigrate President Trump when actually he's got nothing to do with it. He was calling for peace, and he was speaking in another part of the Capitol. His real supporters were there watching him, and all of the storming of the Capitol sort of happened either before he finished his speech or as his supporters were moving down to the Capitol. So they're not telling you this as well, and they're not telling you about the inaccuracy of PCR tests. They're not telling you about Sweden and Brazil and Belarus and how they're they're better off than we are marginally, in even though they didn't lock down, because they're actually then making them out to be bad people. The smearing that Donald Trump gets, President Bolsonaro of Brazil also gets, because he's his own man, and he speaks from Christian and conservative principles, and he cares about his people. He doesn't follow the globalist line, and so he gets denigrated completely. But if you watch the mainstream media, you'd think he was some kind of fascist when actually he's not. He's the opposite. So yeah, and again, it's the mainstream media and I would say that the cultural Marxist progressive lobby, if you like, I don't know what the best way to describe them is. They would then accuse anyone who doesn't agree with them of sowing division and sowing hatred, when they're the ones who are creating the division and the hatred continuously. And, I would just like to get on with my life and go about my business. And I think most people would. But you're continually accused of being bad or degenerate or racist or homophobic or bigoted, xenophobic, transphobic, whatever, if you don't agree with the globalist mainstream media line. It's absolutely appalling.
That's right. And most people don't think there's anything strange or irregular about the fact that the Black Lives Matter protests were not only not criticised by the media, but were lauded and praised by them, and they were held up to be this noble cause that everyone should get behind. And yet the anti-lockdown protests, where people were protesting about the loss of their natural-born rights and freedoms, these people are dangerous. They're granny killers. They're all getting together in close proximity and spreading the virus and doing all this great harm. But somehow the BLM protesters weren't doing that. And most people just don't apply scrutiny and common sense to the situation to ask, well, hang on a minute, how come they're portraying these events in a certain light, but these other events in another light? And they just don't see that there's that bias and there's that mind control conditioning going on there.
You said it exactly right. I mean, it's blatant double standards, and I think more and more people can see this. I think actually half the country can see this, and this is the encouraging thing, that in the United States, I mean, even with the results as they have been declared, which are fake. You've got President Trump as 73 million, I think, votes. I think he probably really got about 80 million votes. So there's tens and tens of millions. There's over half the country in America can see through the lies and still voted for President Trump. In this country, we had a similar thing, obviously, 4 or 5 years ago with Brexit and the Brexit referendum, and the mainstream media was, trying to make out that Brexit was racist, Brexit was xenophobic. It's also an act of self-destruction. We're going to ruin our economy, and it was none of those things. People just didn't agree with the EU, the EU's directives and rules and regulations and sovereignty over our nation, when we should be an independent sovereign nation. But they tried to smear the campaign and smear the people. But even though they did that, 52% of people voted to leave the European Union. I guess not everyone listening might agree with me. Maybe the majority will. But, that was the case in this country, where people removed themselves from the influence of the mainstream media and made their own decision based on looking into it very carefully and the evidence, and made the decision for themselves. So there is hope that the silent majority will rise again in this country and say enough is enough. But I think in this country, people don't want to go out and do acts of violence, and I certainly don't either. I mean, I abhor violence and vandalism and thuggery, but you see that from Black Lives Matter. On the streets in London in the summer, and they were given a free pass. They were called largely peaceful protests by everybody, when there was immense thuggery and vandalism going on, particularly of our statues and monuments, like the statue of Churchill in Parliament Square, vandalised over and over again. And but then your peaceful lockdown protests, freedom rallies were smeared as like conspiracy theorists and nutters, and they were attacked by the police. Completely peaceful until the police came in and charged in and attacked the crowds, and then the photographers were there to take the picture, and then the headline is "Violence at Far-Right Conspiracy Theory Rally," and is making out that the people that were attending were in the wrong, when actually it was the violent actions of the riot police that led to the violence that took place on that day. So the mainstream media inverts reality. And whenever they're plugging something, it's a warning sign that, okay, something is happening here. We got to be aware that this is the next thing they're going to come and try to impose on us. Goebbels would be proud of the mainstream media now for what they do.
Yep. Many rumours that any day now there's going to be an emergency broadcast system that kicks in and the mainstream media is going to be taken down. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if it did, it would make me so happy. I would like nothing more than to see the destruction of these traitors. Yeah. So I believe you're running to become London Mayor yourself.
Yes, that's right. I actually said it was about a year ago I declared I was going to go for London Mayor, first as an independent, but now I've set up the Heritage Party, so I'll be running as a candidate for the Heritage Party, both for the Mayor and the Assembly. But yeah, we've got to get rid of Sadiq Khan. I mean, he's been so bad for London over 4 years, now 5 years. I mean, crime has gone through the roof. It's not just that we've got, out of control crime. The political correctness in the police force is out of control, so that they are more concerned with diversity and in the police force and policing people's thoughts and tweets than actually dealing with real crime. Arresting.
Cultural-marxism.
Yeah, exactly. It's all cultural Marxism that's come in, this kind of ideology. So, first of all, both Sadiq Khan and Theresa May as well, from the fake conservatives, wanted a massive reduction in stop and search. Well, stop and search is a very, very good tool for getting knives off the street. So, it's not pleasant, I know. But when it's done in a targeted and intelligent fashion, it can cut crime. You need to do that. But that was one of the, first bits of political correctness that came in under Sadiq Khan. And, also the hate crime unit, where they're looking for online hate, whatever they call. So looking for people who are say the wrong thing about transgenderism or this or that, and then to investigate them. I mean, that's such a waste of time and money and effort when, the police should be catching real criminals, people who are burglars and thieves and grooming gangs and so on. That's what the police should be doing. But then more recently, attacking peaceful freedom protesters with this, blatantly obvious two-tier policing that's going on. You see, as we mentioned before, the difference between policing Black Lives Matter rallies and freedom rallies. But also, Sadiq Khan's been a disaster for the roads and for traffic. I'm putting in road narrowing measures all over London and pop-up cycle lanes, which are hardly used, and then they cause congestion and so on, and bringing in extra charges for road users. I mean, that's really an issue for Londoners, but it's also a big issue for businesses that come in and use London's roads, because if you go through, they're going to get extra charges, and that's going to hurt businesses at a time where they're already suffering under the Johnson government's regime, I should say, lockdown measures. So we've got to get rid of Sadiq Khan and restore some common sense to London. So that's why I'm running, and I hope I'll get the chance to do that.
Well, yeah, I think you'd make a brilliant London mayor. I think you'd actually make a great prime minister. I think you should be taking the PM's role. I'm not sure you'd actually want it, but somebody like yourself in office would really make a change to things. I do find it interesting that we had the general election in December 2019, and Boris Johnson, got back in then, just ahead of a pandemic that just happened to come out of Wuhan, China, round about the same time. So there he was, installed to be at the helm when this thing, just happened to randomly come along. And it's such a joke that I hear the World Health Organization is only now sending a team to investigate the origins of this so-called virus, when it's already wreaked absolute untold havoc all around the world. Like a year plus later, they decide to go and investigate it. I suspect that's just a PR exercise to suggest that something is being done about it, whereas the truth is going to lie somewhere else. But yeah, yourself in the PM's role would be incredible. Just tell me a bit more about the principles behind the Heritage Party then, if you would.
Yeah, of course. Well, I set it up to be a socially conservative party, and I was thinking about it really in the spring and so on. And the first lockdown gave me the time to do that. So, what I mean by that is we are for defending and maintaining our heritage, which has been under attack for decades by cultural Marxism, which is this, you could describe it as the long march through the institutions, where you have left-wing ideologues coming in who hate our country, want to tear it down, undermine everything that's good about our country, and denigrate it and criticize it with critical theory, and undermine the things that hold it together, such as the family, such as Christianity, such as national sovereignty, such as our institutions, small businesses, and so on. And in every single way, they've got into education, they got into the media, they got into the Labour Party, Conservative Party, and corrupted those institutions, which once did good and built up our country, and have now sort of been infused with this destructive cultural Marxist thinking. Well, we need to fight that, and we need to say that this is a good country with a good history. We're not going to have, organizations like Antifa and Black Lives Matter continually denigrating us and talking us down and tearing our society down without countering it. We're going to stand up for our history and stand up for our nation. So that's one of the things. But it's also, many things that go along with that. I mean, free speech and liberty, that's part of our heritage. It's our tradition, and it's a good thing. We have individual liberty and free speech, and that's one of the foundations of our country and freedom, that gives us the possibility of being happy and enjoying life. So we need to stand up for that. Traditional family values as well, standing up for the family, and preserving our environment, financial responsibility, because the Conservative Party is supposed to be financially responsible, but they've been so irresponsible they actually make Tony Blair look good. We've had more debt in the added to the national debt in the last year than I think we've had, in all of history up to 2008, the last financial crisis. It's appalling, the waste of money that's gone on there. And we want low immigration as well, and that goes hand in hand with making the country self-sufficient in skills. And we need to be training our own young people again with an education system that's focused on excellence and teaching them the skills they need to stand on their own 2 feet in this country, rather than not having the skills, learning a load of dumbed down rubbish, and then ending up on state provided income, or just working in a job that doesn't fulfill their potential. We need to train young people to be doctors and nurses and engineers and scientists and mathematicians, far more, and and also the trades that need to be done, plumbers and builders and craftsmen and so on, so that we don't need to rely on mass immigration to fill the jobs and positions that need to be done, because we're not training our own British young people with the skills they need to do it. So that's a big part of what we stand for as well, in sort of our education, employment and economics platform. So yeah, it's essentially socially conservative with a bit of, I wouldn't say libertarianism, but a desire for liberty, which is part of it as well.
Well, David, awesome to talk to you today, brother. We're on the same page with so many things. I greatly admire your integrity and your tenacity and drive, and I just wish there were more people like you out there in these public positions. So much respect for what you're doing. Do you just want to let people know where they can find your resources online, where they can connect with you, and if they want to get more involved with the Heritage Party?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's two things. So I've got my personal website, which is davidkurten.net, and people can leave me a message on there. There's also the Heritage Party website, so that's heritageparty.org, and there you can read our manifesto, and you can join as a member, or you can sign up as a volunteer for the Heritage Party. So heritageparty.org, that's our party website.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today.